What's up guys, Mike from Rockville, and today I'm going to be explaining all the different buttons, faders, and controls on the ROCKFORCE W2. It comes in three separate parts. You have your antenna, the main unit, and the power cable. This antenna actually screws onto the back of the device to enhance the 2.4 gigahertz signal, which is how we create the wireless DMX signal. So to do that, you're just going to line this end up to the antenna port over here, line it up, and just screw on clockwise. After you have the antenna on the main unit, we're going to take our power cable, take the male end over here, plug it into the port over here, take the other end and plug it into the wall, and then we're going to turn on the power button over here on the side. While we're already looking at the back of the unit, let me explain what else is on the back next to the power button. So right over here we have a polarity switch, and this is actually going to come into play if you're actually trying to connect your DMX controller to a light using a DMX cable. On some lights, the polarity might be different, so once you plug in a cable from this controller into the light, you might have to mess around with the polarity, which you can do with the switch over here. Right next to that, we have a DMX output, and that's to use a wired DMX cable to go from this DMX controller into your light. And then over here, we have our wireless DMX power switch, which allows you to actually turn on the 2.4 gigahertz wireless DMX technology. And once we turn on the wireless DMX power, you'll actually notice the wireless DMX LED indicator turns on. And this has multiple different colors because there's multiple different channels on the wireless DMX that we can choose from. But we'll get to that a little later. But speaking of the wireless DMX channels, there's this button over here which allows us to scroll through the different channels that we can choose from. Now if we move our attention to the actual front of the main unit, we have on the left the scanner side. Now there are 12 scanners that you can choose from, and what this allows you to do is independently set your light fixtures to different addresses on your DMX controller so you can control them independently. That might sound a little confusing, and this is an advanced DMX setting, but we'll get to this later when we actually set the addresses of our DMX lights to our W2. Now, as I said before, there are 12 scanners, and you can always know which ones are selected because when you click on it, there's an LED that will illuminate alongside it. So when you're just starting out, maybe this is your first DMX controller that you're trying to control your lights with, I would recommend turning all of the scanners on. And then as you get more advanced with your DMX programming and the addressing of your lights, you can select which scanners you want active at that time. Now moving along to the right, we have our faders. Now there are 8 physical faders, but this DMX controller actually allows us to control 16 faders by using the page select button. So for page 1, we have faders 1 through 8, and then page B, we have faders 9 through 16. And you can switch between page A and page B by pressing the page select button here. Now why does this page select button matter? Well, certain DMX lights have multiple different DMX channel modes that you can choose within them. Depending on what DMX channel mode you are in will determine how many faders you have control over. So for example, on a DMX light, it might have 2 different modes, 8 channel mode and 16 channel mode. So if you are using that light in 8 channel mode, you're actually going to want to make sure that your page select is set to page A. This will ensure that the 8 channels that you have control over with the 8 faders on the DMX controller are being mapped properly to the light. However, if I was using that same exact light in 16 channel DMX mode, I would want to switch between page A and page B depending on what parameter I'm trying to change in my light. What does that mean? Well, for example, certain lights have different effects and presets mapped to different DMX channels and modes on their light. Let's say for this light, in 16 channel DMX mode, the strobe function is controlled by fader 15. So if I want to access fader 15 while hooked up to that light, I would go page select to make sure I'm on page B, and then I would be able to use this fader to control fader 15. Now if you're a little confused or if that sounded too technical, don't worry, we're going to explain it all once we connect our lights and I show you how everything works. But let's keep going with the different controls. Now above our faders, we actually have our scenes. Now there are 8 scenes that you can program within 30 different banks. Now above our faders, we have our scene buttons, and there are 8 different scenes that we can program within each of the 30 banks that we have. Now a scene is basically a shortcut that we program ourselves to to accomplish something on the DMX controller. For example, let's say I'm running a play and there's a scene in the play where I want all of the lights on the stage to turn to the color red. Instead of going through my faders and actually manually adjusting each of the colors of the DMX lights to the color red, I can pre-program that command to scene 1 so that when that scene comes up, I just click it and all of the lights turn red. It is important to note that scenes can be different things depending on what your lights are capable of doing. For example, a light might have a strobe mode that you can access through your DMX controller. You can program that to a scene so that when you click that scene button for that light, it will access the strobe mode. What's important to take away from this is that scenes are basically just shortcuts that we can access quickly instead of having to manually fumble around and change everything on our DMX controller. Now, before I talk about the digital display here that helps explain everything, I want to talk to you guys about chases. A chase is basically a user-generated program that we create, which is a bunch of scenes strung together. Now, on this DMX controller, we actually have 6 different chases that we can create within the 30 banks. Don't worry if this sounds confusing, I'm going to show you how to program scenes and chases in another video. Now, below our chase buttons is our blackout button, and this is basically a button that you can press to kill all of the lights and make everything turn off. Now, on top of these 8 faders here, we also have a speed and a fade time fader, and those are going to be used whenever we are running our chases. But let's move our attention to this digital display over here, because this is basically where we can see everything we are doing in our DMX controller. So you'll notice these words all alongside our screen, and that basically lets us know what is happening in our DMX controller. For example, we have our chase LED, our scene LED, and our bank LED. This basically tells us which chase we are running, which scene we are in, and which bank we are pulling all this information from. If I click the blackout button, you'll notice this portion of the display starts blinking to let us know we are in blackout mode. If I hold the program button, you'll notice this portion of the display starts to blink to let us know we are in program mode. And then if I press the auto/delete button, it'll actually trigger the music trigger playback, which I can then go into auto triggering by pressing that button right above it. And this will allow us to run our chases and our scenes. That's basically the digital display explained, but let's lastly take a look at these buttons on the side. So we have our bank up button, which allows us to select through the 30 different banks that we can choose from. We have the bank down button, which is another feature that allows us to navigate quickly between our 30 banks. Then we have the program button, which if we hold, it will take us into program mode, which is how we program our scenes and our chases. Then we have our MIDI add button, which is actually how we program our scenes together and our chases together when we're building them up. Then we have our auto delete button, which is actually how we run our chases and run our scenes when we're ready to. Then we have the music/bank copy button, which allows us to trigger our music mode if we're trying to use the internal microphone on the W2. And the bank copy button, which actually allows us to copy banks within the 30 banks so that we can create different presets. And then we have our tap sync button, which is an advanced feature to really fine tune the speed and the fade time at which our chases run. So hopefully this video explained all the buttons, faders, and controls on the ROCKFORCE W2, but if you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out to our customer support tech team through phone or email. As always, guys, I'm Mike from Rockville, and I'll see you in the next one.